Hey there, fantasy lovers. Welcome back to Fantasy Chat, the podcast where we dive deep into the magical world of mythical creatures and folklore. I'm Xander.
And I'm Ady. If you're new here, this is where we explore the fascinating world of fantasy creatures in a way that's perfect for beginners and folklore enthusiasts alike.
That's right. We don't just tell you the basic facts. We dig into the cultural significance, the modern interpretations, and honestly, we share our completely unfiltered opinions about these creatures.
Today, we're exploring 4 incredible beings from Celtic and European folklore: leprechauns, changelings, mermaids, and banshees. And let me tell you, we have some hot takes coming your way.
Oh, we definitely do. These creatures have been shaping stories, beliefs, and popular culture for centuries, and they're still incredibly relevant today. So whether you're studying mythology, writing your own fantasy stories, or just love learning about magical beings, this episode is for you.
Let's jump right in with everyone's favorite tiny troublemaker, the leprechaun. Now, I have to ask, when I say leprechaun, what's the first image that pops into your head?
Oh man, probably a little guy in a green suit with a top hat sitting on a pot of gold, right? Maybe with a 4-leaf clover somewhere in the picture?
Exactly, the Lucky Charms mascot, basically. But here's the thing that blew my mind when I first learned about traditional Irish leprechauns. They're so much more complex and honestly, way cooler than that commercial image.
Tell me more about that.
So, first off, they're master craftsmen. Traditional leprechauns are cobblers. They make and repair shoes. And they're not just good at it, they're legendary for their skill. You'd often hear them before you'd see them because of the tap-tap-tapping of their tiny hammers on leather.
That's so much more interesting than just magical gold guy.
Right. And here's another thing that surprised me. They weren't always wearing green. In the original Irish folklore, leprechauns were often described wearing red coats or even blue. The green association really became dominant because of St. Patrick's Day marketing and the general connection to Ireland.
No way. So we've basically been colorizing them wrong this whole time?
Pretty much. And they're also incredibly clever tricksters. If you manage to catch a leprechaun, they're supposed to grant you 3 wishes or lead you to their pot of gold. But, and this is crucial, they're master manipulators. They'll find every possible loophole to get out of their bargain or twist your wishes against you.
So they're basically tiny lawyers with magical powers.
Ha, that's actually a perfect way to put it. They're smart, they're cunning, and they always come out on top. Which brings us to how they show up in modern life. Obviously, St. Patrick's Day is the big one.
Oh yeah. Every March, it's like leprechaun overload. Decorations, costumes, movies, food packaging. They're absolutely everywhere. And I have to admit, I have really mixed feelings about the whole thing.
Yeah, what's your take on it?
On one hand, I genuinely love that these ancient stories are still alive and reaching new generations. Kids today know what a leprechaun is, even if it's a simplified version. There's something beautiful about that continuity.
Totally.
But on the other hand, the commercialized version has become so removed from actual Irish culture and tradition that it sometimes feels borderline disrespectful. Like we've taken these complex folkloric figures and turned them into cartoon mascots selling breakfast cereal.
That's such a good point. For me, what I love most about traditional leprechauns is exactly that trickster element you mentioned. They're not benevolent wish granters, they're complicated characters with their own motivations and agenda.
Yes, they're survivalists. They've learned how to navigate a world where bigger, more powerful beings might try to exploit them, so they've become masters of cunning and misdirection.
Exactly. There's something almost admirable about their refusal to be anyone's victim, you know? They turn the tables every time. All right, speaking of creatures that mess with people's expectations, Let's talk about changelings. Now, these are some genuinely unsettling beings from folklore.
Oh boy, changelings. Yeah, these give me serious chills. So for anyone who's not familiar, a changeling is essentially a fairy child that's been secretly swapped with a human baby.
Right, so the story goes that fairies would sneak into homes at night, steal healthy human infants, and leave behind their own fairy child, the changeling. To the parents, this changeling child would look identical to their original baby, but would behave completely differently.
Yeah, like constantly crying, refusing to eat, not reaching developmental milestones, or just having this otherworldly, unsettling quality about them.
And here's where this folklore gets really dark from a historical perspective. This belief was often used to explain things that people didn't understand at the time, like postpartum depression, autism, intellectual disabilities, or other developmental differences.
That's the really tragic part. Because when parents believed their child was actually a changeling, some truly horrific things were done to try to get their real child back, or force the changeling to reveal its true nature.
Exactly. Children were sometimes abandoned, subjected to harmful tests, or worse. It's a really sobering reminder of how folklore and superstition, while often beautiful and meaningful, can also have devastating real-world consequences when taken literally.
Absolutely. But in modern times, the changeling concept has evolved into something much more metaphorical and actually quite powerful. You see it explored in literature, movies, TV shows, usually as a way to examine themes of identity, belonging, and feeling like an outsider.
Yes, like how many of us have felt at some point in our lives like we don't quite fit with our families, or wondered if maybe we were adopted, or just felt fundamentally different from everyone around us?
Oh, totally. That universal feeling of, am I really where I belong? Do these people truly understand me?
Exactly. And I think that's why the changeling concept still resonates so strongly today. Even though we obviously don't literally believe in fairy swapping, it taps into something really fundamental about the human experience.
What's your personal take on changelings as a concept? Because I have to be honest, they make me pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I can appreciate them as a literary device for exploring complex themes around identity, neurodiversity, and belonging. Those modern interpretations can be really meaningful and healing.
Mm-hmm.
But the original folklore, it's genuinely disturbing when you think about the real children and families who suffered because of these beliefs. It's one of those cases where I think the modern reinterpretations are actually much more valuable and healthy than the traditional stories.
I completely agree. Sometimes folklore evolution is a really good thing. Speaking of evolution, let's move on to a creature that's undergone some fascinating transformations over the centuries: mermaids.
Oh, I am so excited to talk about mermaids. These might be one of the most universally beloved fantasy creatures, and for good reason. What I find absolutely fascinating is how similar mermaid-like beings appear in cultures all around the world, completely independently.
Yes! You've got the classic sirens from Greek mythology, but then you also have Ningyo from Japanese folklore, Mami Wata from West and Central African traditions, the Iara from Brazilian legend, Melusine from European medieval stories.
Right. It's like humans across different continents and time periods all independently thought, you know what would be cool? A person who's half fish.
And there's probably some deep psychological reason for that, right? Like maybe it represents our connection to the ocean, where life originally came from, or our fascination with the unknown depths.
Ooh, I love that theory. And here's something that I think gets overlooked a lot. Traditional mermaids weren't all the gentle romantic figures we often see today. Many of them were portrayed as powerful, sometimes dangerous beings.
Oh, absolutely. The original sirens would lure sailors to their deaths with their enchanting songs. They were beautiful, yes, but also deadly. They represented both the allure and the very real danger of the ocean.
Exactly. Which makes sense when you think about it from a sailor's perspective. The ocean gives life, provides food, enables trade and exploration, but it's also unpredictable, violent, and can kill you in an instant.
Mm-hmm. So mermaids embody that duality perfectly. Now, in terms of how they show up in everyday modern life, oh my gosh, they are everywhere right now.
Right? We're having like a full mermaid renaissance. You've got people buying mermaid tails for swimming, mermaid-themed cafes and restaurants, professional mermaids who perform at aquariums and parties.
The whole mermaid core or mercore aesthetic trend. Iridescent makeup, holographic nail polish, shell and pearl jewelry, those dreamy underwater vibes in photography and interior design.
Yes, and can I just say, I am absolutely here for all of it.
Really? Tell me why. What is it about the current mermaid trend that appeals to you?
Well, first of all, I think mermaids represent this perfect balance of strength and beauty, wildness and grace. They're not passive, they're powerful beings who are completely at home in their environment.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And second, in our current world where we're dealing with climate change and ocean pollution, I feel like mermaids serve as these beautiful reminders of what we're at risk of losing. They connect us to the ocean in this magical way that makes us want to protect it.
Wow, that's such a beautiful way to think about it. I hadn't considered the environmental angle, but you're absolutely right.
And third, and this might be my favorite part, the modern mermaid community has become incredibly inclusive. You see mermaids of all body types, all ethnicities, all genders, all ages. It's not just one narrow beauty standard anymore.
Yes, that's so important. The ocean doesn't discriminate, so why should mermaids? I love seeing different interpretations and representations.
Exactly. Plus, there's something just inherently joyful about the whole mermaid thing. Like, it's people giving themselves permission to be magical and playful and embrace fantasy in their everyday lives.
I love that. In a world that can feel pretty dark sometimes, having this whole community of people who are like, you know what? I'm going to put on a tail and swim like a mermaid because it makes me happy. That's genuinely beautiful.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to our final creature. And this one takes us in a much more somber direction, the Banshee.
Ah, the Banshee. This is deeply rooted Irish folklore here. The Banshee, or Bean Sida in Irish Gaelic, which literally translates to woman of the fairy mounds, is a female spirit whose cry serves as an omen that someone in a particular family is about to die.
Right, and this is really important. She's not just appearing to random people. The Banshee is traditionally connected to specific Irish families, particularly ancient Gaelic families. She's like a spiritual guardian or herald tied to that family's bloodline.
Exactly. And the descriptions of her can vary quite a bit. Sometimes she's portrayed as a beautiful young woman, sometimes as a matron, sometimes as an elderly crone. But she's often seen performing specific actions, combing her long hair with a silver comb, washing bloody clothes in a river, or simply standing outside the family home weeping.
The imagery is so haunting and poetic. That mournful, keening wail echoing through the night. It gives me chills just thinking about it.
It really is. And what I find fascinating is that she's not malevolent. She's not causing the death or trying to frighten people. She's mourning. She's acknowledging that loss is coming and ensuring that it will be properly grieved.
That's such an important distinction. In terms of how banshees show up in modern everyday life, they don't appear as frequently in popular culture as our other creatures. But when they do, it's usually in horror movies or ghost stories.
Yeah, unfortunately, they often get portrayed as just generic, scary, screaming spirits, which really misses the cultural significance. But I've also noticed that the term banshee has entered casual language to describe anyone who's wailing loudly or being dramatic.
Right, like, she was screaming like a banshee. And honestly, that kind of bothers me.
Why does that bother you?
Because in the original folklore, the banshee isn't just some hysterical woman making noise. She's a deeply spiritual, meaningful figure. A mourner, a herald, someone who's intimately connected to a family's history and lineage.
Absolutely.
Using banshee as a casual insult for any loud woman strips away all of that cultural and spiritual significance. It reduces this complex, sacred figure to a simple stereotype about crazy, screaming females.
That's a really important point. It's another example of how folklore can get diluted or misrepresented when it enters popular usage. What do you find most compelling about traditional banshees?
For me, I'm fascinated by how the banshee represents this idea that grief and death are natural, sacred parts of life that deserve acknowledgement and respect. In many modern cultures, we try to hide from death or sanitize it, but the banshee tradition says no, this loss matters. This person's passing will not go unnoticed or unmourned.
There's something almost comforting about that, isn't there? The idea that there's this spiritual presence watching over your family, ensuring that when your time comes, someone will mourn you properly.
Exactly. She's not there to terrorize or harm, she's there to honor. And I think that makes her one of the most genuinely compassionate figures in all of folklore, even though she's associated with death.
That's beautiful. You know, talking about all these creatures today, I'm struck by how each one tells us something different about the human experience and the cultures that created these stories.
Absolutely. Leprechauns teach us about cunning, self-reliance, and turning disadvantages into advantages. Changelings explore our deepest fears about belonging and identity. Mermaids celebrate the beauty and power of nature while representing the duality of attraction and danger. And banshees remind us that grief and loss are sacred parts of the human experience.
And what's really amazing is that these aren't just historical curiosities. They're still evolving, still being reinterpreted, still finding new meanings in our modern world.
Yes, that's what makes folklore so powerful. It's not static. It grows and changes with us while still carrying these core truths about what it means to be human.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's journey through Celtic and European folklore. Thank you so much for joining us on Fantasy Chat. If this was your first time listening, welcome to our little community of myth and magic enthusiasts.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and most importantly, let us know what mythical creatures you'd like us to explore next. We love hearing from our listeners and getting your suggestions for future episodes.
Until next time, keep your sense of wonder alive, stay curious about the stories that have shaped our world, and remember, there's magic in every tale if you know where to look for it.
Thanks for listening to Fantasy Chat. I'm Ady.
And I'm Xander. See you in the next adventure.